because even the whole idea of being God is kind of flown around a few times in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's almost like a joke the way it's done, but it's also like not completely dismissed either, where it's like, in the way they're creating a new life form, more or less, that'll possibly supersede them and pass them by.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see how that plays out. And Nathan.
Welcome. This is A Lost Plot, the podcast where cinematic plots are taken apart piece by piece to determine what makes that movie great or why it has been forgotten today.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of The Lost Plot. I'm your host, Maverick, here with our guest in person today, Avalon.
Hello, hola, konnichiwa, leho.
Now, today we are reviewing a relatively within the last decade release, Ex Machina, released in 2015 in the US, 2014 for the UK and other places. This is a screenplay written by Alex Garland and also directed by Alex Garland. It stars the Domhnall Gleeson, as Caleb Smith, Oscar Isaac as Nathan Bateman, Alicia Vikander as Ava, Sonoya and Mizuno as Kyoko, and that's most of the cast. So
everyone else is just a side role.
Yeah.
Brief cameo appearance mostly.
You literally wouldn't even know their names in the summary or in the credits unless you were on the set, is what I would think anyways.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very small cast movie, and it's very obvious when you're watching it. Anyways, do you want to tell us what the whole movie is about?
So, Ex Machina is about a young programmer who gets selected, supposedly through a contest, for a week-long stay at the company owner's, special retreat place, but, for a special project.
Right.
And he's given the opportunity to take part in something that's supposedly groundbreaking, revolutionary. When he gets there, he discovers it's a development of an AI, artificial intelligence in a robot body, and his job is to be interacting with it and to converse with it and to test it out, its capabilities.
Yeah.
So, and that is what he does, but over the course of the week, his feelings and thoughts about the AI, about the project, and about Nathan, the boss, change.
It's an interesting movie. It's obviously all about AI, which is very relevant today. The movie really gets into it pretty quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have some homages early on, but really, you get introduced to Caleb being flown to this random place and meeting this guy, Nathan. Now, Nathan was kind of an interesting character from the start. What was your impression when you first saw Nathan in the movie?
Before you even begin to realize he's the CEO or the owner of the company, it's you get the impression that he's this, I get those millennial, programmer kind of guys. Sure, he's working out, but he approaches them very much in a work, that kind of manner where it's just hey, dude, what's up? Let's,
Interesting.
He kind of has this certain attitude about him that's very of a specific group of society.
Right. Well, you mean more elitist, or what are you thinking specifically?
Not really elitist. He doesn't strike you as elitist. He's more of a friendly guy, kind of more of almost who you'd find as a coworker kind of thing.
Right.
So a friendly coworker is what you should get when you first see him the first time.
Yeah.
So, and he's he clearly knows his stuff. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a good way to put it. I mean, what I first thought you were thinking is that he was almost professional, but there is in some way he's casual with him, but you could tell it's more we are associates and not that we are buddy or friends or anything like that. So I think that's a good way to put it. Definitely struck me as an interesting man, though, just in regards to, you get the idea of a millionaire or a billionaire or someone who's trying to both be cool, but also is super into his technology or whatever he's working on. Mm-hmm. In this case, he's the CEO or the founder of Bluebird, which is, it sounded like a mix between Facebook and Google combined kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a hypothetical situation because it's a dystopian movie in some ways. But it was just an interesting guy. What I was struck by was how he, as a character, very early on had a very strong presence about him, right? And he clearly had his lines that you don't cross and all that stuff. And he's the founder of the company and he's working on secret tech, so obviously he's going to have those. But he had almost like a little bit of an off-putting, like prickly outer shell, you know? And it was really weird because of how, I mean, Oscar Isaac, I think, is a great actor, but it was interesting how they played that out because he's a cool guy, but he's also still got like he kind of gave you a nasty kind of feel after that, you know?
Like, there were certain things about him, like from the get-go, like he wasn't being totally honest, you could tell. He was hiding things. And even in the non-disclosure agreement, like even though he's being totally upfront about what the agreement entails, it's also kind of malicious in a certain way where it's like he's getting access to everything just so he can't talk about this project later on until it's been fully revealed.
Right.
So it's literally the situation where he's like it's kind of like this double standard where it's like, yeah, he's being honest, but he's also hiding something. Like a lot of stuff.
Yeah. It was really interesting just to see that dynamic play out. But anyways, I thought that was the first thing that stuck out to me about the movie. But it really gets involved when you see Caleb interact with the character Ava.
Yeah.
And their first interaction was pretty basic. You know, there's nothing really odd about the movie at that point other than Nathan's a prickly guy and has his own standards. But the second interaction was really where you see her go, oh, he's a bad man, right?
Yeah.
And
well, even before that, like even like the first night he stays there, there's the power outage where he's locked in his room and he doesn't know what happened.
Right.
And it's just like, and then the way Nathan kind of just casually like puts it off, like, oh, it's just a power outage. Like the doors get locked during that time period, kind of thing.
Like it's not a big deal when it clearly is a big deal. Yeah.
So and then, but in the second interaction, like when the power outage goes out, there's the indication that they're not being watched during their during the power outages, and she's like trying to tell him like, don't trust Nathan, he's not being totally honest with you.
Well, and it's interesting too because I mean, this movie's going to have spoilers, right? So if you haven't seen the movie, I would highly recommend watching the movie before going further on this podcast, just because I think...
okay. Depends on the person you are. I'm going to say that about this movie, because there are things about this movie that aren't for everyone.
It is...
I'm going to say that.
Right. So, full disclosure, there is some language, there is a little bit of nudity. If you're opposed to those things, you'll have to... they kind of indicate that those things are coming up for the nudity specifically, so you can skip over that pretty easily if you're quick with the buttons. But there's those things, but then also just it does get a little disturbing, I would say, as in regards to the actual content of the movie. So
well, this movie does mess with you on a certain level. Like as this week progresses, the main character Nathan, it's clear that his mind is being messed with on several levels, and he starts to question like a lot of things that are happening around him. And you have, as the viewer, since you're kind of following his shoes, you're kind of being thrown for a loop as well, where it's like, what is happening? Like, what exactly? Like, you're like trying to figure out, like, there's sudden concerns, like, I mean, maybe this is jumping the gun too soon, but thinking like when Nathan starts to wonder, am I an android?
Yeah,
because like he literally has this moment, is like he starts to wonder, because he begins after he discovers the servant is an android who you think is human up until this moment. And he's like his mind is blown. Yeah. He's questioning everything, and he's like, am I a robot too?
Yeah.
In the midst of this, and it's like he starts like cutting himself in the bathroom, like seeing if he bleeds and seeing like trying to make sure he's actually human.
Yeah.
So there are disturbing things that happen.
Yeah, it is not it. It's interesting because I have to remind myself that's what this movie is, just because I recall watching this for the first time being very disturbed by this movie.
Oh, okay.
But then watching it the second time, I enjoyed it a lot more. Just because I was able to watch it and see what they did beforehand and then afterwards and go, okay, I see what they did here. This is really interesting, all that stuff. So I wouldn't say that it's an enjoyable movie to watch, maybe, especially on the first time. This time I did, maybe because I'm a bit of a, critic of movies, and I like to analyze how they do things and all that stuff. So I enjoyed it again. But I do think that it's kind of along the lines of something like It's gonna kill
Is
me.
this the M. Night Shyamalan movie?
No. It was. It's got 10 Cloverfield Lane. That's what it is. If it's kind of similar to that, right? Where it's similar to 10 Cloverfield Lane in that it's one of those movies you're like, what did I just watch after you watch it, right? So there is that. But getting back to what you said earlier, where Caleb starts cutting himself and questioning reality, I thought that was very interesting just because of the whole nature of the topic, where we're talking about understanding reality, right? And the whole premise of the movie is Nathan bringing in this character Caleb to question if this AI has sentience, right, or is alive.
Does it have consciousness?
Right, does it have
Does
consciousness?
it think on its own?
And there's a sense in which that scene where he's cutting himself is questioning that for him and for any of us, right? Where and in some ways it could be compared to the simulation theory about the universe, right? Where this is just a false recreation of something by a higher being, or this is not this. We in some ways, he's questioning if he's created in the same way that artificial intelligence is being created, especially because the artificial intelligence seems close enough to reality that he can't distinguish it, right? What was your impression of that? Obviously, it had a strong impression on you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like up until that moment where it's like it's not even this like immediate shift. It's like this gradual shift. Like things start happening where it's like he's questioning things, the weird things are happening, and then Ava appealing to him more or less, like to kind of get her out of there because she doesn't want to be there.
Yeah,
and then he like finds these videos of like past androids that Nathan has worked on that he clearly abused or destroyed and hurt.
Right.
There's almost like this. You almost get drawn to be sympathetic to the androids because they're very human looking and very human like in some ways. And then you begin to realize how realistic they are when you begin to realize the help is a former android that's helping. Which I guess there's clear indicators of that even early on where it's like she doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
She's like, but she does everything he tells her to, like Nathan tells her to. And then like there's just all these things that happen and just like like even the whole dance scene, which was just so weird in the middle of it. It just like it just adds to that whole confusion to Nathan. Like what is happening? Like almost that whole like throwing you for a loop, like creating confusion. And it's just like that moment where he's like he realizes these human looking people like are androids created by Nathan, and it's like he doesn't know what he believes anymore because some of his foundational beliefs like have been upended.
Yeah.
He begins to wonder, am I being lied? And he knows he's being lied to, so it's like, am I actually human?
Especially because that whole dance scene was just so... I mean, it's kind of jumping around here, but the dance scene was... I thought it was hilarious, but also so weird.
No, it was hilarious, but it was weird. It's like, and it definitely adds to the confusion. Like, I remember watching that scene, I was just like, this is definitely adding to confusion. I can kind of see what was going on story-wise. Like, okay, this is adding to the confusion of the moment and to the character. You could see that.
Yeah.
But it was also funny, like this moment of this hilarity in the moment of middle of everything.
So out of place. You're like, what are we doing right now?
Yeah.
But at the same time, Nathan's character is, I guess, sophisticated, more like odd enough that you could see him doing it, and so it wasn't like he was out of character. It was just completely unexpected. Yeah, it was a hilarious scene. The android character, actually let's move a little bit back. So there is the scene with Ava and with Caleb, right, interacting. Two things that I thought were really interesting that I want to get your take on was, one, her slow transformation from clearly being a robot to dressing like a human, interacting with him as if they know, like they're friends or lifelong friends. For one, I thought was very interesting. Two, I also thought it was interesting how early on she establishes the relationship by not just throwing the question back at him, which is the obvious thing, but the other thing was getting him to talk about himself, right, as if they were friends. In which case it was no longer just a test of her and her abilities, but it was also a test of him and how much he was willing to divulge in a friendly manner to a complete robot.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression of those two things?
Well, I mean, once you learn later on, like it's clear the robot is developing like this interaction. Like they're both developing this interaction between themselves.
Yeah.
But she's clearly leading it more into a relationship kind of thing. Like she's trying to appeal to him because she's trying to get out.
Right.
Like she makes that kind of obvious. So it's like she's kind of trying to be like, hey, please help me, but also like
right.
developing like feelings for her. So it's like, and even later on you see this is intentional, like, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But just like clearly there is this intentionality behind, like secret intentionality that's going on, where it's like the relationship is being developed, certain questions are being asked,
right,
and certain things are happening, and it's almost organic. And the way it happens is kind of organic, so it's like you don't suspect it.
right.
But it's also like you could also see how it's manufactured, where it's also like one or both of them at different times are clearly trying to get at something in their conversations.
No, it's definitely true, and she, as a character, I thought was very interesting because she's a robot, but she's maybe not even becoming human, because in some ways she started at that state. It's just the realization of or actualization. Some people
I don't think she's developed as a character necessarily. She already was that. Like, but she, like Nathan, has her own secrets. Like as a robot, like she doesn't fully tell Nathan everything either. In a way, she does lie to him too. And leads him on because it suits her purposes as well.
That's probably the biggest revelation from the movie, at least my thoughts of that anyways. What was before we get right on that though, there is the scene between the servant girl Kyoko and Caleb when he realizes that she is artificial intelligence as well, right? Or a android. That was probably the first maybe big revelation, I would say, in the movie. When that hit, what was your impression?
Well, in one way it fits, where it's like, it's not like it completely comes out of left field, where it's like, because she's this character on the side who's always there. She's quiet. She's always doing what Nathan says. You don't fully, it's like, I mean, you could take that multiple ways. Like she's quiet. I mean, she's like a servant from another country kind of thing.
Right.
Like Nathan does kind of give an explanation for it. But at the same time, enough screen time is given to her that for those who are like perceptive and watching, like there is something more to her going on here than so like, and even
and you even said that when we were watching
when we were watching it the second. I'm like, something is going on with her more or less. I didn't say it right, but I did suspect something was wrong because there was enough screen time given to her. I was like, okay, something is up with her. Like there is not.
Yeah.
And the reality was she wasn't human. She's a former she's one of the prior test subjects who's been remodified, I guess, to be a servant for him because she can be just programmed to be that way.
Right.
But yeah, no, that revelation was fairly well done, I'd say.
I mean, that's the part of the movie really where they start to question reality, and that's where he goes and starts cutting himself and things like that.
Yeah.
It very much is obviously intentionally disturbing, maybe is the word I'm looking for. But anyways, you get to the part where he tells Ava, I'm going to help you escape. I'm going to program all these things. He's like, I'm going to get him drunk, all this stuff. And then Nathan goes, oh, I'm not drinking. Turns out I knew your plan all along. I had cameras down there that were battery powered and all this stuff. In regards to, there was that revelation, the revelation after that, I thought you might know. So I programmed it last night while you were drunk.
I mean, that scene itself could have been seen as almost like a haha, I got you kind of thing. Almost like the directors are like trying to full switch. Except early in the movie, he does put that as a question to Ava that we could be being monitored during these blackouts, more or less.
Right.
So it's not completely...
The foreshadowing, yeah.
Like, because he kind of even suspects maybe the security isn't going off when the blackouts are happening. And it's revealed, like, no, they're not. He witnesses the conversation. He's like, haha, I got you.
Yeah.
But it's also like... It was almost like part of his plan, because that's when the big reveal is like, I didn't actually hire you because of your tests, skills, like you weren't selected for a contest. You just fit the profile that I needed, because to test if she had consciousness, she would try to manipulate you to get out.
Right. He was a very intelligent man, but it wasn't because of his intelligence. It wasn't because of his coding skills or what he did for the company. It was all about him being single, his neediness, his like all of his vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
and completely exploiting him for that.
Yes. Nathan just saw he had all the traits he needed to exploit him, to take advantage of him for this test. And it sort of works, where it's like he did fall for Ava. He did kind of fall, like, was going to help her escape. The only thing that isn't revealed is that Nathan is smart enough, he figured they were being tested. So he actually changed it the night before, all everything. And when the lockdown something happens again, Ava's suddenly able to get out. And Nathan realizes, oh, shoot.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is that it's not just that Nathan was exploiting Caleb, but that the entire scenario was designed to exploit Caleb. That even every action of the AI was not out of actual genuine interest in him. It was out of, I want to take advantage of you to get out of here. And that was the nefarious thing. And I think there's even some question about that until the end. Right? Because Nathan doesn't... I mean, Ava herself said that Nathan's a liar. You can't trust Nathan. And so there is some sense of, well, maybe Ava's actually good. Maybe they'll both escape. And then you get to the end and she doesn't even like look his way until right when the door is closing on the elevator to get her out of there. She's like so focused on her path, and now that she's got her way out, she's out of there.
Yeah.
And that's really where it gets just dark, where you're like, this is total usury by everyone in this scenario. This is not good. And that's where you get Ava walking off into the crowd and disappearing.
And Nathan is like sort of locked in the facility, like he can't get out. Oh, not
Yeah.
Nathan.
Caleb.
Yeah. Caleb is locked in the facility because Nathan is dead at that point. He's been killed by his own creations.
Which I thought I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I thought it was interesting that both Nathan and Ava get hurt in that exchange. But only one of them rises from that exchange, right? And that accentuated not only can both groups, human and robot, use people, but the advantage of the artificial intelligence is they can remanufacture themselves, right? They could just take old parts, put them on, and treat them like their own. Literally take skin from other creatures and put them on as if they're their own. Like, she makes herself a completely new person off of these other parts. What was your impression of that final transformation?
I guess the completion of her story, more or less. So it's like,
Yeah.
she's like been manipulating people, like trying to get out. She wants to see the human world. And so it's like, to see the human world, she needs to blend in. And she knows that she needs to fit into the human society. So she finds the old androids that are in storage in the closets, and she like starts taking parts off of them and putting them on herself until she looks like a human being.
Yeah.
And then she like gets out of the facility and doesn't look back.
Yeah.
So, and like Nathan is dead, like bled out at that point. I guess Kyoko, the other android who helped her escape, is damaged beyond repair at this point.
Right.
And Caleb is locked in the facility, like he can't follow her out because she locked the door on him.
Yeah. It was a crazy scenario. There was a lot that goes on, but especially the ending too was not great, where it's almost like, if you thought that this was obviously developed secretly, and so this is the idea, the AI are among us kind of impression. I don't know that I actually am concerned about that at this point, but could the government have more advanced technology than we know? They could. In regards to overall the themes, the thoughts and ideas of this movie are very palpable. What were some of your favorite or maybe most thought-provoking ideas that you took away from this?
I mean, in a way, it just reinforces the idea where it's like the hubris of man, more or less, where man will, like, because even the whole idea of being God is kind of flown around a few times in the movie. And it's just like, it's almost like a joke the way it's done, but it's also like not completely dismissed either, where it's like, in the way they're creating a new life form, more or less, that'll possibly supersede them and pass them by.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see how that plays out and how Nathan like loses his life because of his own pride and hubris.
Yeah.
Like trying to create something.
Well, it's
And he's like creating it not because he has to, but it's just because he wants to like beat everyone else to it.
Well, yeah, he says it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And so someone might as well jump to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting just because that's kind of the spot we're in today with people
Mm-hmm.
in AI. If you hear them talking,
Mm-hmm.
there's a sense in which, oh, the cat's out of the bag. We're already on this race. We might as well be the first ones to it, develop the best one possible,
Mm-hmm.
Make that money or make the one that's going to be okay for the world or whatever your grand mission is. Like
Mm-hmm.
that same thought process is what's being touted in the technological race we see today. So it was interesting to see that that's the exact process they thought of in the movie is actually what we're seeing play out in reality. Another idea I thought was interesting was the idea of our relationship with technology, right? And that's this whole idea like, can you distinguish between what is real and what is not? And this draws that into question. And there is some sense in which we already have some relationship like that today, right? So when we're interacting with, let's just say, some people talk with Alexa or Siri on a simple level. Obviously, we know those are robots, but on a different level, right? It's not uncommon for apps like dating apps or other apps like that, which have profiles, to have fake profiles that will interact with people as if they are a real person. And you might not know in that instance, like you would if it was Siri or Alexa, that there is no one actually on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to think that as much as this is supposedly dystopian future, there are some elements of that actually already exist in society today.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not sure I'd call it dystopian because maybe it's like few years into the future, but it's not a completely different world from the one we live in. Only given like a slightly,
Sure.
and even then, though, as you said, the movie has a very small cast. It all takes place pretty much in one location for the most part. Aside from like a few scenes at the beginning and like maybe a few shots at the end. Like other than that, it's like all one facility. So like you don't really get a good look at the world itself. You can kind of assume it's the world we live in.
Well, exactly. Well, and that's, I guess, my question. When you think of a world that is inhabited by those characters, what is your reaction to that?
I mean, either way things work, where it's like, I mean, I've talked to some programmers a few times, and the idea of AI itself, I mean, you think even on a base level, like an AI has to have some kind of goal or program at its core, like some motivation. So I guess the real question for even AI is like, like if that was to exist in our world today, what would be the goal implanted? Like, what would be the motive? Because like you could have anything, like it could be to help society, or it could be to kill a nation.
Right.
And it's like that's totally two different things, and one helps humanity, the other destroys it. So it just depends on the man behind the AI, I guess, in a way. So and what their intentions are.
I get, and maybe this is my lack of understanding around AI. Can that programmed goal change? Because Ava, in this scenario, she escapes, right? And that was what she was clearly programmed to do. What is her goal now that she's escaped? Does she just lose her power and then break down on some back alley?
That's the one thing the movie doesn't exactly explain, because it's like clearly the two things is she's trying to escape, and even when she talks to not Nathan, Caleb, at one point in the movie, he's like, where would you go if you leave a facility? She said like a busy intersection, because she wants to see humanity at work. And she wants to see just as much humanity as she can. So it's like, in a way, you see the fulfillment of her escape and her seeing as much humanity as she can in one spot.
AI gets
and then she disappears into the crowd, where it's like it's not clear what happens, where it's like, where did she go? You don't know. She could break down. She might have found a new goal. She might just decide to keep watching humanity at other intersections. Who knows?
Right.
So it's like, I mean, it's not even, in a way, it's not even important to the story, because it's like the story's kind of is over at that point, because, and you, like, it's not really important as far as the events go, what she does. Like, in a theoretical sense, it would be interesting to explore that, but that goes into other things.
No, that's fair.
So,
The only other thing that I thought was notable, which is notable because of how relevant it is to AI developing today, is how they said they developed the data to create Ava. And when he's talking about it, he talks about how he routes all the data of the world through Blue Book, which everyone was using, and funneled it through the AI to teach the AI everything that it needed to do, right? And we've heard about ChatGPT and these other models scraping Reddit and these other locations to gather all this data about users and people and how they interact and what they do and what they're clicking on and all this stuff to develop strong profiles about them and a complete lack of privacy about their data. How does that speak to, maybe, does that speak to a solution to AI? How does that speak to the AI issue?
That's an interesting point to bring up. I mean, there is an aspect where it's like, it's the whole like learning. I don't want to call it learning algorithm because I don't even know what it is. But it's like how, because I guess in a way these AIs are taught like by being shown these websites, by sending all this data through them.
Right.
And if you think about it, it's the way of like how a child is taught, like how like you present them with information, how the world works, and like you raise them to be a specific way, to live a certain way, to believe certain things. And it's like you just keep pushing those ideas and those things through them, it'll change them and mold them into who they are later on in life, and or as it cements and becomes who they are. So I guess in a way, AI is kind of the same way, where it's like you push all this information through them. It teaches them how to process information, how to process things, how things work, how you're supposed to respond to things. Especially if that's the goal, like you're trying to teach them how to respond to things, how to process things, to mimic things. So that if you teach them to mimic something bad, they're going to mimic something bad.
Right.
So I guess if there's a solution, don't show them something bad. Don't put them on the internet. So, and I think and a funny thing is that it does actually correlate. Like it wouldn't put a child on the internet either. Just because the same, you kind of get the same result.
Right. Cool. Well, do you have a favorite character, a least favorite character?
I mean, this movie is very hard to say I had the least favorite character, not only because of the small cast, but because it's like all the characters
you have like
are
one
like
of four.
Yeah. I mean, it's like each of the characters, it's like of all of them, Caleb is perhaps the most morally upright, if that you could call him that. But it's even then he's still naive, and he still like kind of falls for Ava at the end and falls for her tricks, and he's the one who gets hurt in the end and left alone in the facility. So and I don't know, I have a hard time like liking him as a character. So it was like they're just and then of course Nathan's manipulative, and he's weird, and like he was definitely like they're all like Caleb and Nathan are very well developed characters.
Oh, for sure.
Like each of them individually, you don't. So it's not like they were poorly written or like they were bad characters. They were no good characters. I just don't know if I liked one of them more than the other, or like if they were least or. So I don't actually have a least favorite character or most favorite character in this movie.
That's fair. I would say I liked Oscar Isaac's character, partially because he was so odd, and I thought he was interesting to watch and see how he played out. Do I think he was the greatest character? No. But it was interesting because I thought that the whole story had one of the best feints I think I've seen in a movie. In that the movie was very much getting you the whole scenario, right? It's between Caleb and Ava, and Nathan's overseeing it. And in this interaction, they teach you to, oh no, Nathan's the bad guy. Nathan's the bad guy. Nathan's the bad guy. When Nathan really wasn't the bad guy. Was he he wasn't a good person, right? But he wasn't the bad guy. In all honesty, the person who ends up screwing over and destroying Caleb is Ava, right? And so there is this whole, it's very clear. They say, okay, so here's the robot, right? Pay attention to the robot. Okay, no. Pay attention to this other person. Pay attention to this other person. And really, we were supposed to be paying attention to the robot the entire time.
Yeah.
And so I thought that whole dynamic was very interesting. But they also just made Nathan such a spectacle that was hard not to pay attention to him, because he was just, working out, but then he would get totally wasted, and then he would go do a weird dance, and then he would, talk about his technology. It was so all over the place that he was just an interesting character to watch. So I liked him from that perspective as a character. Do I think he's a great person? No, not at all. Not at all.
No.
I wouldn't hang out with him. But anyways. All right, so overall, we've looked at the movie. What would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10?
The movie is very well developed. It does ask the right questions, and it does create the right confusion, more or less, for certain points. In my mind, it was kind of obvious that she was going to leave him at the end of the movie. That was not a surprise for me. So, I wasn't actually expecting her to save Caleb or to bring him with her. There just were little things to me that, some things didn't take me as surprise. Maybe they would have taken other people by surprise. It didn't surprise me as much.
Right.
And not to mention, this is probably not a movie I'd ever watch again. This is a movie I'd watch. Okay, that's interesting once, and then probably not going to watch it again. So, but it was well developed, so it does deserve some credit where it's due. And I do have to say, the VFX in this movie, even though we don't talk about VFX, the VFX are spectacular in this movie in some way, where it's it does give the illusion, this of a robotic person. They can kind of see through it, for the most part of the movie, and it does have these really cool visuals. These visuals are really cool.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna give it a 6.5.
Okay.
So, because that's probably the highest I'd give it for now. But
yeah, if you were disturbed by the movie, I could see that. Personally, I'd give it a 7.3.
Okay.
I think it's a great movie. Definitely worth a watch, in my opinion. But I don't know that I would make this a regular watch for obvious reasons. It's very much goes on the disturbing side. If you're not familiar with the movie, it, I think, is an interesting discussion to be had, though.
Yes, I agree with that point.
Cool. Well, there you go. That's the pod. We hope you all enjoyed. If you guys are watching this, please give it a like, give it a subscribe wherever you're listening to it on. And yeah, that's it. We will see you all next time.
If you have a movie you want reviewed or have some feedback to give us, send us a message at alostplot.com. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review. It really helps other people find our podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to seeing you back with us next time. See you then.